I still remember the exact moment my world shifted. March 15th, 2:47 p.m., standing in the marble-floored lobby of Meridian Industries headquarters. That's when my boss, Director Marcus Whitfield, delivered the blow that would change everything between us forever. "Samantha, I need to speak with you." His voice carried that particular tone, the one that meant bad news was coming, wrapped in corporate politeness. I followed him into Conference Room B, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Seattle. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the polished table where he'd already placed a single sheet of paper. "I'm afraid there's been a change regarding the annual executive gala," Marcus began, not bothering to sit down. "We've had to make some difficult decisions about the guest list." My stomach tightened. The Meridian Annual Gala wasn't just any corporate event. It was the pinnacle of our company's social calendar. Held every year at the Grandview Hotel, it was where million-dollar deals were celebrated, where partnerships were forged over champagne and perfectly prepared cuisine, where careers were made or broken in conversations that lasted mere minutes. Before I tell you exactly how his arrogance became my springboard to the sweetest professional victory of my life, could you take a second to hit that like button and subscribe? Because what I'm about to share will show you how one moment of corporate cruelty can backfire in ways that seem impossible until they happen right in front of $50 million in lost contracts. And trust me, you need to hear every detail of how one man's prejudice destroyed everything he'd built in 15 years. "I don't understand," I said, though part of me already did. "My performance reviews have been exceptional. I closed the Morrison account last month, and the Henderson deal. This isn't about performance, Samantha." Marcus's interruption was swift, dismissive. "It's about fit. The gala is attended by our highest-level executives, board members, major clients. The conversations that happen there are sophisticated, strategic. The implication hung in the air like poison. I wasn't sophisticated enough. I wasn't strategic enough. I wasn't enough, period." "I see." My voice remained steady, though my hands were trembling slightly. "And who made this decision?" "The executive committee." He picked up the paper, my original invitation, and I watched as he tore it in half. The sound seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "I'm sorry, but that's final." I stood there for what felt like an eternity, watching the pieces of my invitation flutter into the wastebasket. 3 years at Meridian Industries. 3 years of 60-hour weeks, of missed family dinners, of proving myself over and over again. 3 years of carefully building my reputation as someone who delivered results, who could be trusted with the biggest accounts, who never let personal feelings interfere with business objectives. And it all came down to this. I wasn't the right fit for a party. "I understand," I said finally. "Thank you for letting me know." As I walked toward the door, Marcus called out, "Oh, and Samantha, I'd appreciate it if you kept this conversation confidential. We wouldn't want to affect team morale." I nodded and left, my heels clicking against the marble with each measured step. But inside, something was burning. Not just anger. That would have been too simple. This was something deeper, more calculating. This was the moment I realized that playing by their rules would never be enough. The next few days passed in a blur of forced normalcy. I attended meetings, submitted reports, smiled at colleagues who asked about my excitement for the gala. Each lie felt like swallowing glass. "Are you wearing that stunning blue dress you showed me?" asked Jennifer from marketing, her eyes bright with genuine excitement. "Actually, I won't be attending," I replied, maintaining my professional composure. Schedule conflict. The disappointment on her face was almost worse than Marcus's dismissal. Jennifer knew how hard I'd worked, how much this recognition meant to me. Her silence spoke volumes. By Thursday, the entire office was buzzing with gala preparations. Conversations revolved around table assignments, menu selections, and the rumor that several Fortune 500 CEOs would be attending. I buried myself in quarterly reports, trying to ignore the excited chatter that seemed to follow me everywhere. That's when my phone rang. "Ms. Caldwell, this is Patricia Chen from the Grandview Hotel. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." The Grandview. The very hotel where my colleagues would be celebrating their success while I sat at home, apparently not sophisticated enough for their company. Not at all, Patricia. What can I do for you? We have a situation with the Meridian Industries event next week. There's been some confusion about the catering arrangements, and frankly, some concerning requests from their event coordinator. Would you be able to come in for a meeting tomorrow? The ownership group specifically requested to speak with you. My blood went cold. The ownership group. After 3 years of carefully maintaining my professional identity, separate from my family's business interests, the two worlds were about to collide. You see, what Marcus Whitfield didn't know, what none of my colleagues knew, was that I owned 49% of the Grandview Hotel. Not through some trust fund or daddy's money, but through years of strategic investment and business acumen that I'd kept completely separate from my corporate career. When my grandmother passed away 5 years ago, she left me her shares in what was then a struggling boutique hotel. Instead of selling them off like everyone expected, I'd worked quietly behind the scenes to transform the Grandview into Seattle's most prestigious luxury venue. Every major corporate event, every high society wedding, every political fundraiser, they all came to us. I'd made this decision deliberately. I wanted to succeed at Meridian Industries on my own merits, not because someone thought I had family money or connections. I wanted my achievements to be mine alone. But now, as I sat in my office listening to Patricia explain this situation with Meridian's event, I realized that my carefully constructed separation was about to crumble. I'll be there tomorrow at 10, I told her. That evening, I drove to the Grandview for the first time in months. As a part owner, I usually handled business remotely, trusting our exceptional management team to maintain the standards that had made us the premier venue in the Pacific Northwest. Walking through the lobby, I felt a familiar surge of pride. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over cream-colored marble floors. Fresh flowers, always fresh flowers, filled the air with subtle fragrance. This wasn't just a hotel. It was a masterpiece of hospitality and elegance. Ms. Caldwell, David Morrison, our general manager, approached with his characteristic warm smile. It's wonderful to see you. Patricia mentioned you'd be coming in tomorrow, but I'm glad you're here now. We need to discuss the Meridian situation. What exactly is the problem, David? His expression darkened. Their event coordinator, a Mr. Marcus Whitfield, has been difficult, demanding significant changes to the menu at the last minute, insisting on modifications to our service protocols, questioning our staff's qualifications. Frankly, he's been treating our people quite poorly. Marcus? Of course. This morning, he actually suggested that our waitstaff wasn't sophisticated enough for his event. David continued, his voice tight with controlled anger. He wanted to hire temporary staff from elsewhere. Can you imagine? I could imagine it perfectly. It was exactly the kind of elitist, condescending behavior I'd witnessed from Marcus countless times. The only difference was that now he was directing it toward people I cared about, people whose livelihoods I was responsible for protecting. Show me the contract, I said. David led me to his office, where he pulled out the thick folder containing all the documentation for the Meridian Industries annual gala. As I read through the correspondence, my anger transformed into something more focused, more dangerous. Marcus had been systematically insulting our staff, demanding unreasonable accommodations, and generally behaving as if the Grandview should be grateful for Meridian's business. What he didn't realize was that we were booked solid for the next 18 months. We didn't need his business. He needed our venue. David, I want you to set up a meeting with Mr. Whitfield for tomorrow. Tell him there are some concerns about the event that require immediate attention from someone with decision-making authority. Of course, Ms. Caldwell. Should I mention that you'll be attending? I smiled, feeling a plan begin to crystallize in my mind. No, let's keep that as a surprise. The next morning, I arrived at the Grandview 30 minutes before the scheduled meeting. I wanted to be absolutely certain everything was perfect, not just for the confrontation I was anticipating, but because standards mattered, regardless of personal circumstances. Patricia met me in the lobby, looking slightly nervous. Ms. Caldwell, are you sure about this approach? We could handle the situation more diplomatically. Patricia, how long have you known me? 3 years, ma'am. And in that time, have you ever known me to handle business matters in a way that wasn't professional? She smiled, relaxing slightly. Never. Then trust me. Mr. Whitfield is about to learn something very important about assumptions. At exactly 10 o'clock, Marcus strode through the hotel's main entrance, his confidence evident in every step. He wore his most expensive suit, the navy one he reserved for impressing major clients, and carried himself with the self-assured air of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. He approached the reception desk, where Patricia waited with professional courtesy. Marcus Whitfield from Meridian Industries. I'm here for the meeting about next week's event. Of course, Mr. Whitfield. Please follow me. As they walked toward the private conference room, I couldn't help but notice how Marcus surveyed the hotel lobby with a critical eye, as if evaluating whether it met his standards. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was literally judging the business I'd helped build, while simultaneously excluding me from the very event that would take place within these walls. Patricia led him to the elegant conference room on the mezzanine level, the one with the panoramic view of Elliott Bay. I was already seated at the far end of the polished mahogany table, reviewing documents with the careful attention of someone who belonged there. Mr. Whitfield, Patricia announced, I'd like you to meet Ms. Samantha Caldwell, one of our principal partners. The moment Marcus saw me, his expression shifted through a fascinating array of emotions. Confusion came first. What was I doing here? Then recognition, followed by what I could only describe as calculation, as if he were trying to determine whether this was some kind of elaborate coincidence. Samantha. His voice was carefully controlled. What an unexpected surprise. Hello, Marcus. I gestured to the chair across from me. Please, sit down. We have quite a bit to discuss. He remained standing, his posture defensive. I'm not sure what kind of game this is, but I'm here to discuss business matters with hotel management. And that's exactly what you're doing. I opened the folder in front of me, revealing copies of all his correspondence with our staff. Patricia tells me you have concerns about our service standards. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken understanding. Marcus was beginning to realize that this wasn't a coincidence, wasn't some elaborate setup. This was reality, and it was far more complex than he'd ever imagined. Sit down, Marcus. My voice was steady, professional, but carried an undertone of authority he'd never heard from me before. We really do have business to discuss. He finally took the chair, his movements stiff and uncertain. For the first time since I'd known him, Marcus Whitfield looked genuinely uncomfortable. The man who had torn up my invitation with such casual cruelty was now sitting across from me in a conference room I partially owned, waiting for me to speak. I opened the folder and began reading from the first document. March 10th. Phone conversation with Patricia Chen. Quote, Your staff clearly doesn't understand the caliber of event we're hosting. I need assurances that the service level will be appropriate for our distinguished guests. End quote. Marcus shifted in his chair. Samantha, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. March 12th, I continued, turning the page. Email to David Morrison. Quote, The proposed waitstaff appears insufficient for an event of this magnitude. We require servers who can engage appropriately with Fortune 500 executives and board members. Please provide detailed backgrounds and qualifications for all personnel assigned to our event. End quote. His face was growing paler with each revelation. I could see the exact moment when he began to understand the full scope of his situation. March 14th, I said, my voice never wavering. Phone conversation with our head of catering, Maria Santos. You told her, and I quote, I hope you understand that this isn't some casual corporate lunch. The people attending this event are accustomed to a certain level of sophistication. I trust your team can rise to the occasion. Those conversations were taken out of context, Marcus said, his voice tight. I was simply ensuring quality. Quality. I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair. That's an interesting word choice, Marcus. Tell me, what exactly did you mean when you told our events coordinator that you needed staff who could fit in with your guests? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Patricia, who had been taking notes silently in the corner, looked up expectantly. Through the conference room's glass walls, I could see the normal bustle of hotel operations continuing. Guests checking in, staff attending to their duties, the machinery of hospitality running smoothly under leadership that valued every team member. I meant experienced, professional. You know how important this event is to Meridian Industries. I do know how important it is, I said, which is why I'm curious about your concerns regarding sophistication and fit. You see, Marcus, our staff at the Grandview includes graduates from Cornell's Hotel School, former managers from the Ritz-Carlton, and service professionals who've worked events for heads of state. When you question their qualifications, you're questioning my judgment. The weight of that statement settled over him visibly. He was beginning to understand that this wasn't just about hurt feelings or workplace politics. This was about business, serious business, and he was no longer in control. But I'm getting ahead of myself, I continued. Patricia, could you please bring in the recording equipment? I think Mr. Whitfield should hear exactly what his quality assurance sounded like to our team. Marcus's eyes widened. Recording equipment? You can't possibly— Oh, but we can. And we do. All business communications at the Grandview are recorded for quality and training purposes. It's clearly stated in our service agreements. The same agreements you signed without reading thoroughly. Patricia returned with a small digital recorder, placing it on the table between us. I pressed play, and Marcus's voice filled the room, not the carefully modulated tone he used in executive meetings, but the dismissive, condescending voice he'd used when he thought he was talking to people who couldn't affect his career. I need your staff to understand that they'll be serving a very different caliber of person than usual. These aren't tourists or casual business travelers. These are serious executives who expect serious service. I hope that's not beyond your capabilities. I stopped the recording. That was your conversation with Maria Santos, who has been in hospitality for 15 years and speaks 4 languages. She was asking about dietary restrictions for your event. Marcus's face had gone from pale to ashen. Samantha, I think you're misinterpreting. Am I? I pressed play again. Look, I don't have time to explain the nuances of high-level corporate entertaining. Either your people can handle it, or we'll find a venue that can. This time, I let the silence stretch longer before speaking. That was your response when David Morrison asked for clarification about your service expectations. David, who has managed events for tech CEOs, foreign diplomats, and members of Congress. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a quieter register. Tell me, Marcus, what exactly made you think our staff wasn't sophisticated enough for your event? The question struck at the heart of everything. Not just his treatment of the hotel staff, but the underlying assumptions that had led him to exclude me from the gala in the first place. The same prejudices, the same narrow definition of who belonged in elite spaces. I didn't mean anything by it, he said finally. I was just trying to ensure everything would go smoothly. By questioning the competence of people you'd never met? By demanding background checks on servers who've worked events far more prestigious than anything Meridian Industries has ever hosted. Patricia cleared her throat softly. Ms. Caldwell, should I mention the Petrov Industries cancellation? I smiled, remembering. Ah, yes. Thank you, Patricia. Marcus, you might find this interesting. Last month, Petrov Industries, you know them, the oil and gas conglomerate, requested the Grandview for their annual shareholder meeting. They offered us a contract worth $200,000 for a 3-day event. Marcus nodded slowly, unsure where this was going. We declined, I said simply. His confusion was evident. You declined $200,000? Their advance team made some comments about our staff that we found unacceptable. Nothing as overt as what you've said, mind you. But the implication was clear. They wanted us to adjust our team composition for their comfort. I paused, letting the parallel sink in. We don't compromise our values for any amount of money. The message was unmistakable. If we had turned down $200,000 from Petrov Industries, Meridian's $75,000 contract was hardly irreplaceable. Marcus seemed to be calculating rapidly, his business mind finally grasping the full scope of his predicament. Samantha, surely we can work something out. This is all just a misunderstanding between colleagues. Colleagues? I tilted my head slightly. That's interesting, Marcus. When exactly did we become colleagues? Was it when you tore up my invitation to the gala? Or perhaps when you told me I wasn't sophisticated enough for strategic conversations. The color drained from his face completely. He had forgotten, in his panic about the hotel situation, that I was still his employee. The employee he had deliberately humiliated just days earlier. That was different. That was about event capacity, about fit. I finished for him. Yes, I remember. The same kind of fit you've been so concerned about regarding our staff. I stood and walked to the window, looking out over Elliott Bay. The afternoon sun was casting the same kind of long shadows I remembered from that conference room at Meridian Industries, but now I was on the other side of the power dynamic entirely. You know what's fascinating about assumptions, Marcus? How quickly they can be shattered. You assumed I was just another mid-level employee who should be grateful for whatever scraps of recognition you chose to throw my way. You assumed our staff were somehow beneath the standards of your precious Gala. You assumed that your business was so valuable that we'd accept any treatment, any demands, any insults you cared to deliver. I turned back to face him. You assumed wrong on every count. Marcus was gripping the edge of the table now, his knuckles white. What do you want, Samantha? What will it take to resolve this? It was the question I'd been waiting for. The moment when his arrogance finally cracked enough to let desperation show through. But I wasn't ready to give him relief just yet. Patricia, could you bring us some coffee? This might take a while. As Patricia left, Marcus and I sat in silence. I could practically see his mind racing, trying to calculate his options. Cancel the event? Impossible. He'd already confirmed attendance from 3 Fortune 500 CEOs and half of Meridian's board of directors. Find another venue? In 5 days? In Seattle? For an event of this magnitude? There weren't any other options, and we both knew it. When Patricia returned with coffee, served, I noted with satisfaction, on our finest china by Miguel, one of the staff members Marcus had deemed insufficiently sophisticated, I finally spoke again. You want to know what I want, Marcus? I want you to understand something fundamental about respect, about how it works, about who deserves it, about what happens when you withhold it from people who've earned it. I took a sip of coffee before continuing. Our staff at the Grandview aren't sophisticated enough for your event? Let me tell you about Maria Santos, whom you treated so dismissively. She escaped El Salvador during the Civil War with nothing but the clothes on her back. She worked her way through culinary school while raising 3 children as a single mother. She now manages catering operations that have fed Nobel laureates, Supreme Court justices, and heads of state. She speaks Spanish, English, French, and Italian fluently, and she can tell you the wine preferences of every major tech CEO on the West Coast. Marcus sat motionless, coffee untouched. David Morrison, whose qualifications you questioned? He has an MBA from Wharton and a master's degree in hospitality from Cornell. He left a position at the Peninsula Beverly Hills, where he was making twice what we pay him, because he wanted to be part of building something special here. He's managed events for everyone from Oprah Winfrey to the President of France. I could see Marcus beginning to understand the magnitude of his miscalculation, but I wasn't finished. Miguel, who just served your coffee? He's completing his master's degree in international business while working full-time. He speaks 5 languages and is being recruited by hotels in Dubai and Singapore. But I suppose none of that matters, since he doesn't look like what you think sophistication should look like. The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't calculation or confusion. This was the uncomfortable recognition of prejudice exposed and examined. I never said anything about how anyone looked, Marcus protested weakly. Didn't you? I opened the folder again. Let's see. You demanded detailed backgrounds and photos of all staff assigned to your event. You specifically requested experienced personnel who would be comfortable interacting with high-level executives. When Patricia asked what that meant, you said you wanted people who would fit in naturally with your guests. I closed the folder and looked directly at him. Marcus, in 3 years of working together, have you ever seen me fail to fit in naturally with high-level executives? Have you ever witnessed me struggle with sophisticated conversation or strategic thinking? He said nothing, because we both knew the answer. My performance reviews were stellar. My client relationships were impeccable. My results spoke for themselves. And yet, I continued, I wasn't sophisticated enough for your gala. I didn't fit. What changed between my successful management of the Morrison account and your decision to exclude me from the celebration? Still nothing. I'll tell you what changed, Marcus. Nothing. The same prejudices that made you question our staff's qualifications are the same ones that made you decide I didn't belong at your precious event. The same narrow worldview that assumes competence and sophistication come with a particular look, a particular background, a particular pedigree. I leaned forward again. But here's what you failed to understand. While you were making assumptions about who belongs in elite spaces, some of us were actually building them. Patricia knocked and entered again. Ms. Caldwell, I have the Henderson Group online too. They're calling about the conference space for next month. Take a message, please. Tell them I'll call back within the hour. As Patricia left, Marcus looked up with sudden recognition. Henderson Group. That's James Henderson's company. Yes, it is. But you closed the Henderson deal for Meridian Industries last month. I did. The pieces were clicking into place for him now. James Henderson, the CEO who had specifically requested to work with me, who had praised my strategic insight and market knowledge, was now booking events at my hotel. How long? Marcus asked quietly. How long what? How long have you owned part of this place? I smiled. 5 years. Since my grandmother passed and left me her shares. Instead of selling them, I chose to invest more. To build something. 5 years. He was staring at the table now. All this time you were… What? Successful? Wealthy? A business owner? I shrugged. I was always those things, Marcus. You just never bothered to look closely enough to notice. The full irony of the situation was finally sinking in for him. The employee he had deemed unworthy of his gala was not only successful in her own right, but was now in a position to determine whether his career-defining event would happen at all. What happens now? He asked. It was time for the real conversation to begin. Now we discuss terms, I said, because despite everything, I'm still a professional. The Grandview honors its contracts, and will honor ours with Meridian Industries. But things are going to change. Marcus looked up hopefully, but I held up a hand to temper his relief. First, you're going to personally apologize to every member of our staff you insulted. Not a generic corporate apology, but individual sincere acknowledgments of their professionalism and expertise. He nodded quickly. Of course, I can do that. Second, you're going to revise Meridian Industries' diversity and inclusion policies. Real changes, not just PR language. I want to see concrete steps toward creating advancement opportunities for employees who don't fit your traditional mold. His nod was less enthusiastic this time, but he agreed. Third, the Meridian Industries annual gala will proceed as planned, but with some modifications to the guest list. Marcus tensed. What kind of modifications? I smiled. Well, you'll need to add someone back to the list. Someone who was inappropriately excluded due to a misunderstanding about sophistication and fit. The realization hit him like a physical blow. You want to attend the gala? I don't want anything, Marcus, but yes, I will be attending. As a guest of the Grandview Hotel, to ensure our service standards meet your exacting requirements. He started to protest, but I cut him off. And Marcus? When you introduce me to those Fortune 500 CEOs and board members, the ones who supposedly require such sophisticated conversation partners, you're going to introduce me as Samantha Caldwell, Senior Account Manager at Meridian Industries and Principal Partner at the Grandview Hotel. The look on his face was worth everything I'd endured over the past week. Pure panic mixed with the dawning understanding that his carefully constructed hierarchy was crumbling around him. There's one more thing, I said, pulling out my phone. I've been offered a position with Harrison and Associates, Regional Director Pacific Northwest. The salary is 40% higher than what Meridian pays me, plus equity participation. Marcus went completely white. Harrison and Associates was Meridian's biggest competitor in the region. I haven't accepted yet, I continued calmly. I believe in loyalty, in giving people chances to do the right thing. But my patience isn't unlimited. He was trapped, and we both knew it. Cancel the gala? Impossible. Let me leave for the competition? Career suicide. Continue treating me as a second-class employee while I controlled the venue for his most important event? Untenable. "What do you need from me?" he asked quietly. "I need you to be the leader you should have been all along. I need you to recognize talent regardless of where it comes from or what it looks like. I need you to understand that sophistication isn't about background or appearance. It's about competence, integrity, and results." I stood up, gathering my papers. "The gala will be beautiful, Marcus. Our staff will provide impeccable service because that's what we do. Your guests will be impressed, your event will be successful, and your career will continue to flourish." He looked up at me, confusion mixing with relief. "But you'll remember this moment," I continued. "You'll remember what it costs to underestimate people, and hopefully, you'll be a better leader for it." As I walked toward the door, Marcus called out one last time, "Samantha, are you going to take the Harrison and Associates position?" I paused, my hand on the door handle. "That depends, Marcus. Ask me again after the gala." The elevator ride down to the lobby gave me time to process what had just happened. 6 days ago, I had been standing in a conference room at Meridian Industries, watching my invitation get torn in half, feeling smaller and more powerless than I had in years. Now, I was riding down from a different conference room, having just negotiated from a position of absolute strength. The lobby of the Grandview spread out before me as the elevator doors opened. My lobby, my hotel, my investment in excellence and hospitality. Guests moved through the space with the relaxed confidence that comes from being truly well cared for. Staff attended to their duties with the pride that comes from working somewhere that values their contributions. This was what sophistication actually looked like. Not exclusion, but inclusion. Not gatekeeping, but excellence. Not assumptions about who belonged, but recognition of talent wherever it emerged. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Jennifer from marketing. Still can't believe you're missing the gala. Rain check on hearing about your mystery schedule conflict?" I smiled, typing back. "Actually, the conflict got resolved. See you there." As I walked out into the Seattle afternoon, I realized that something fundamental had shifted. For 5 years, I had maintained 2 separate identities, corporate employee and business owner, believing that success in one realm required invisibility in the other. But Marcus's arrogance had forced me to integrate those identities, to stand fully in my power instead of compartmentalizing it. The annual gala would happen in 4 days. I would attend as both Samantha Caldwell, the account manager, and Samantha Caldwell, the hotel owner, no longer hiding half of who I was. Marcus would introduce me to those Fortune 500 CEOs and board members, and they would meet someone who had built success through competence rather than connections, through merit rather than background. But more than that, they would meet someone who had learned to value talent wherever it came from, who understood that true sophistication meant lifting others up rather than keeping them out. Marcus Whitfield had intended to teach me a lesson about knowing my place. Instead, he had learned something far more valuable, that assumptions about other people's places can be dangerous, especially when those people have been building their own stages while you weren't paying attention. The sweetest part of professional revenge isn't the moment of triumph. It's the moment when your opponent realizes they created their own downfall. Marcus had handed me every tool I needed to dismantle his prejudices and rebuild our professional relationship on terms of actual equality. In 4 days, surrounded by the sophisticated conversations and strategic networking he had deemed me unworthy of, Marcus would watch me belong effortlessly in a space I had literally helped create. And perhaps, if he was capable of growth, he would finally understand what sophistication really meant.